I don't know. I'm not even sure what exhibits we found. I don't remember.
Courtroom 209 is now in session. Honorable Judge Sarah B. Wallace presiding.
Look here.
Good morning. We're on the record on Norman Anderson v. Janet Griswold with the interveners, Colorado Republican State Central Committee, and Donald J. Trump. May I have entries of appearance if just one person for each group could make the appearances?
Good morning, Your Honor. Eric Olson for petitioners, along with Sean Grimsley, Jason Murray, Martha Turney, Mario Nicholas, and Nicholas Sus.
Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor. Scott Gusser on behalf of President Trump. With me is Jeff Blue, Jacob Roth, Chris Halbon, who's not been admitted yet pro se. We'll keep him quiet. Mr. Justin North as well. And I think that's it for our side for the attorneys. Thank you, Your Honor.
There's so many of you, it becomes a memory test.
Here's more for the list. Jane Raskin on behalf of the intervener, Republican State Committee, Republican Party of Colorado. With me, Mike Melito, Nathan Mulker, and Bob Kitzmiller.
Great. For some reason, it's the Colorado Republican State Central.
State Central Committee, a lot of C's in there.
Yeah, which gets me tripped up as well.
Good morning, Your Honor. Michael Kotlarczyk from the Attorney General's Office on behalf of Secretary of State Janet Griswold. With me at council table is the Deputy Secretary of State, Christopher Beal, and also Jen Sullivan from the Attorney General's Office.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Are the petitioners ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. I do think one preliminary matter about the potential expert from intervener Trump, based on discussions this morning, they've said that they've decided or an expert is not available, so that they're not going to call an expert. New expert, yeah.
That's correct, Your Honor. There was a false alarm yesterday, which we were not able to get.
Okay,
And then also, we are withdrawing one witness,
okay,
and I think I've notified opposing counsel.
Yes.
okay.
Great. Thank you. We ready to proceed with testimony? Oh, sorry.
I just have one thing, Your Honor, for clarification for the protective order. Are we at this point able to reveal the names of witnesses? I know some of them were revealed in opening argument, but I want to just get clarification for that.
Do the petitioners have a point of view? I think you were mainly concerned about the witnesses you were
Good
calling.
evening, everybody.
Correct. I guess the question is going forward, or is it a question to unseal the stuff that's been filed already?
I've had questions about the names of witnesses.
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to reveal
We're
them.
kind of just hoping
but I don't want
Yeah.
to.
the South
No,
is going to cooperate.
Of your own witnesses?
Yes.
There was
So,
a lot of issues
Our
yesterday.
view is what Your Honor said, which was we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose any witnesses before the hearing, which we did. But now that we're underway in a public proceeding, the names of the witnesses are fine to reveal.
Okay, that's fine with the court as well.
Are we ready to start with testimony?
If you are.
I am. All right. At this point, petitioners call Dr. Peter Seamy.
sure to speak into the microphone, okay?
Good morning,
So
Dr.
also,
Simi.
Some of the witnesses you may have a hard
Could you
time
please
hearing.
introduce yourself
There's
and
nothing
spell
that
your
I
last
can do
name?
about that.
Pete Simi, S-I-M-I,
Dr. Simi, what do you do?
professor of sociology at Chapman University.
Where's Chapman?
It's in Southern California.
You're here as an expert witness. How would you describe your expertise?
In short, political violence and political extremism.
How do you know about political violence and political extremism?
I've been studying these issues my entire career, 27 years, since 1996.
Do you have any formal training in political violence and political extremism?
Yes, I earned a PhD in sociology, where that was one of the main emphases of my studies in 2003.
And you said you've been working in this field for about 25, 27 years. Tell us a little bit about the kind of work you've done over the past 2.5 decades.
Yeah, I've collected data using a number of different methods to study political extremism and political violence, to include ethnographic field work, interviews with current and former members of extremist groups, and then a variety of different types of archival methods to gather data and information about both political extremism and political violence.
I want to talk about some of the methodologies you just mentioned, and to help us keep
Turn
track,
it down a little bit
I'm
on
going
my
to
end.
write them down on the flip chart so we can come back to it
I
a
don't
couple
know if that may
times
be
during
affecting
your
how loud it
testimony.
is for you all.
Okay.
And I believe the first kind of methodology you mentioned was field work, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. What is field work?
Field work is a type of method that's employed by a range of different disciplines in the social sciences and frankly outside of the social sciences, in the military and business world as well. But it's a method of gathering information where you spend time with people in their natural environment in order to understand a culture, a community, a group, a set of individuals, learn from their perspective, learn how they understand the world, learn about their lives, in natural settings. And so for me, that's meant spending lots of time with active members of different types of extremist groups, actually living with families and individuals in some cases, attending gatherings and so forth.
When you say living with families in some instances, tell us a little bit more about that kind of field work.
Well, that's sometimes referred to as embedded field work, where you're actually, living with the objects of your study, the subjects of your study, and that for me that meant staying in spare bedrooms or crashing on the living room couch and observing individuals in their daily lives and the other types of activities that they're involved in beyond, what they do in their home.
And I believe the second kind of methodology you mentioned that you relied on for your past 2.5 decades was interviews, is that right?
Yes, that's
Okay. Tell us what you mean by interviews.
Well, interviews.
This
are
whole thing
basically a
is
structured type
really,
of
really
conversation.
stupid, but we are truly
Sit
in
down with a
danger
person
of President
and
Trump
ask
not being
specific
allowed on the ballot.
questions, based on, whatever the focus of your study is. And
It's
so,
something
again, for
that
me,
they are
that meant
determined
interviewing, current members of extremist
try and
groups, but
prevent
also
him from
former
running.
members as well.
What was the third kind of methodology you mentioned?
Archival?
Okay. Tell us what archival work is.
Well, that's kind of a big bucket. It covers a broad kind of range of different things would fall under archival research. That would be, if you think about an archive, it's basically just a collection of information. Sometimes archives are generated for the very specific purposes to allow researchers to conduct studies of various kinds. And other archives are not necessarily generated for that purpose explicitly, but they do provide researchers an opportunity to conduct studies. So if you think about, for instance, a video archive would be YouTube. And then, of course, there's lots of different historical archives that are available at universities, for example. Social media is a type of archive where you're studying platforms and how people communicate on platforms. That would be a kind of archive. Websites are a kind of archive. Newspapers are a kind of archive. So it does cover a broad range of things that fall in that.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Simi. And if I could just make a request for the core reporter's benefit, if we could slow down a little bit when we're talking, I'm sure everyone would appreciate it. Now, are these three kinds of methodologies that we've talked about, are those standard methodologies used in sociology?
Very much so.
How do you know that?
Well, working in the field for 27 years, part of that's part of my job. Part of what you do in terms of presenting your research at professional conferences. That's one of the things that's discussed is research methodology. When you submit your research for peer review in terms of academic journal articles, research methods are certainly scrutinized and reviewed. And then I teach both undergraduate research methods now at Chapman, but previously at the University of Nebraska, I taught PhD level research methods.
Is your teaching, is that just part of a course, or is that a standalone course?
Research methods is a standalone course.
Okay. And are the methods that we're talking about today, the methods you teach in your research methods course?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of your experience with each of these methodologies. And I want to talk first generally, and then we'll talk specifically
I
about
don't know what his
the
experience
groups,
with these
involved in the
methodologies
January
have
6th
anything to do with whether or
attack.
not.
Okay.
It
How
just
many?
seems so dumb to me.
How much field work have you done generally in your career to study extremist groups?
Thousands of hours, literally.
Okay. And then have you done field
Oh,
work?
I'm assuming that their argument is going to be
I know I'm
that
supposed to talk in the
he
microphone.
incited
Let me ask
the
question.
extremist groups.
Have you done field work? Well, let me ask a special
what
question.
they're trying to
What
say?
groups have you identified as playing a leading role in the January 6th attack?
The Proud Boys, 3%ers, and Oath Keepers.
Okay. Have you also done field work with those groups?
Yes, I have.
Okay. So, if it's okay with you, Dr. C, I'll just write J6 and then put all three. Is that okay to show your familiarity with the groups involved in this case?
Yes,
Okay.
that's fine.
I'm sorry, what does the J6 stand for?
The groups involved in January 6th. Sorry, trying to fit it all on one chart, Your Honor. For interviews, how many interviews of right-wing extremists have you done in your career?
217.
And how many interviews have you done with members of the Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, and 3%ers?
14.
And what about archival research? How would you describe the amount of archival research you've done in your career?
It's a little trickier than the field work where you can count hours of the interviews, where you count number of interviews. But, you can look at it in terms of time spent. You can look at it in terms of number of different archives, number of websites, social media platforms. But given that that's really where I started in 1996 was online and doing archival research online, definitely in the thousands.
Okay. And have you done archival research involving the three groups involved in January 6th?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Now, Dr. Simi, I want to talk a little bit about your work in this case. How did the archival material available for your work here compare to the kind of archival material you typically rely on?
It's very consistent.
How's that?
Similar types of materials, social media materials, court documents, scholarship, existing scholarship, folks who are also studying the same topics, looking at their findings, government reports, just a variety of different kinds of materials that I've used over the years, very comparable to what was done in this case.
And you've used all three methodologies for your work in this case. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Is it common for work in sociology to rely on all three of these methodologies?
Well, this would be referred to as a multi-method approach, and multi-method approaches are often referred to as kind of the gold standard. Certainly to conduct research in a accurate manner, it doesn't require using all three. You could conduct a very legitimate study with any one or some combination, but using all three certainly would be, like I said, kind of like the gold standard.
Dr. Seamy, have you testified as an expert before?
Yes, I have.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Testified in the Science v. Kessler civil case that was related to the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia. As you may recall, that was a rally that turned deadly violent in 2017, and I testified on behalf of the plaintiffs in that case as it relates to the way in which Unite the Right rally was organized and the central role that violence played in how the event was organized.
Have you worked on other cases as an expert?
Yes, I have.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I testified in a murder case in Portland, Oregon. I was asked by the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office to review some materials in terms of statements and posts and so forth that the defendant who'd been charged in that case had made. And the District Attorney's Office asked for me to offer an opinion as to whether I felt those statements were consistent with white supremacist extremist beliefs.
Have you ever worked on behalf of defendants in cases?
Yes, I have many times. I've worked with federal public defenders' offices, for example, across the country.
Now, have you published on extremist political violence?
Yes, I have.
Tell us about some of your publications.
Well, I've written a number of articles, more than 60 peer-reviewed articles or book chapters and edited volumes that address different facets of political violence and political extremism, and I've published or co-authored 2 books on the topic.
Tell us about the 2 books.
Okay. The first book was American Swastika Inside the White Power Movement's Hidden Spaces of Hate. That relied on all 3 of the methods that we were just discussing, field work and interviews and archival research. And the basic focus of the book was looking at the kind of cultural and social spaces that are important to white supremacist extremists in terms of sustaining their beliefs and the central role that violence plays within that culture. And the second book that's due to be published in the next month or so, I guess, is actually looking at the forces or the influences that ultimately led to the attack on the Capitol on January 6th.
What's your new book called?
Out of Hiding.
Why did you choose that title?
Well, we look at the way in which, starting with the election of Barack Obama in 2008 and a series of other developments following that, how that led to a substantial reemergence of far-right extremists.
And the out of hiding refers to sort of coming out of hiding?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, on the screen, I've put Plaintiff's Exhibit 161, which is a copy of your CV, and I don't want to go in to everything in this, and really welcome guidance from Your Honor in terms of how you want to do this, but it would be easy just to move to him as a demonstrative exhibit so you have an understanding of his expertise, Your Honor, or we can go through a couple of highlights. What would be most preferable to you?
Why don't we just walk through his qualifications, the highlights would be fine.
Okay, great. So,
So it takes a sociologist to help us understand whether or not he should be allowed on the
Dr.
ballot?
Seamy, if we,
Okay.
if we scroll down, we see your education, and we've already talked about that. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the trainings that you've given?
Yes, we've done a number of trainings for law enforcement, the legal field, educators over the years. In terms of law enforcement, I've provided training to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Homeland
I'm
Security.
not actually sure
Federal
whether
Bureau of
this
Prisons,
lawyer that's up now
Department of
is for the
Justice,
state
and
or
a number of state
which
level
one?
and local level law enforcement agencies across the country. Done trainings for legal organizations like the American Bar Association.
I'm wanting to say that it's the state.
Educational institutions across the country.
And have you received some grants and some grants from federal government agencies to study political extremism?
Yes, I have.
Can you tell
Of
us,
course he
it's on the
has.
screen right now, can you tell us a couple examples of those?
Sure. The National Institute of Justice, which is housed under the Department of Department of Homeland Security.
What kind of trainings do you provide? What kind of grants, what kind of work do you do under those grants?
Sure, it's basic research. That is research intended to look at different questions as it relates to the causes and consequences of political extremism and political violence, looking at different factors at the individual, group, and broader societal level in terms of what kinds of things influence these issues and what kinds of measures seem to be most effective in terms of countering them.
And here on the screen, I have your expert legal consultation. Is this a list of the cases where you've been retained as an expert on this page and the next?
Yep, it appears to be.
Okay. And then, did you provide testimony to the January 6th committee?
Yes, I did.
Why was that?
I was invited to provide written testimony.
Fair to say, Dr. Seamy, you've been working on issues of right-wing extremism well before we've been working together in this case?
Yes, I have.
So his testimony is going to
Okay.
be all about why
Did you work with us to prepare a demonstrative exhibit to summarize your work in this case?
Yes, I did.
insurrectionist.
Okay. I'm having a
Based
little bit
on
of computer issue. Let me see if I can
all the schooling that I've had.
bring it up on the right screen.
While you're doing that, I just had a quick question. You said that the book coming out of hiding is from 2008 forward. When did kind of culminated on January 6th? Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Did you start working on it before January 6th?
We did, and that happened while we were working on it, which obviously added an additional item that certainly an additional development that we needed to address because it was a new, obviously, facet that is a substantial, important historical event that was very relevant to what we were already, analyzing and discussing.
So it was a work in progress, and then that becomes a new chapter or chapters.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And on that, Dr. Seamy, did you express any concerns about the possibilities of violence related to the aftermath of the 2020 election before it happened?
Yes, I did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in the summer of 2020, I thought it was pretty clear that depending on the outcome of the election, there was a lot of anger and resentment and mobilization that was really starting to increase among far-right extremists, and that should Donald Trump not be reelected, I thought it was pretty clear that far-right extremists would respond with political violence.
I think I got the tech issues worked out. So this demonstrative that we worked together to prepare for your summary?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let's go to the first page. And tell us, what topic did you address in your work in this case?
Looking at the kind of defining characteristics of far-right extremism, including kind of central aspects of the communication style, the influence that Donald Trump and relationship Donald Trump has developed with far-right extremists. That includes certain communication strategies, the motives
But
for
he
those
didn't-
who attacked the Capitol on
he didn't
January
have any
6th,
coordination
and then
with
Donald
them
Trump's role
at all.
in the attack on the Capitol.
How does your expertise
And
over
why
the
isn't
past
anybody
27
ever
years help you address
Analyzing
these
the
topics?
left and their violence.
Well, when you've spent as much time as I have, directly observing, directly engaging, interviewing active and formerly active members of far-right extremist groups, and those aren't, who weren't affiliated with specific groups as well, understanding that culture provides lots of different types of insight about things like motivations. And then the archival research is really important as well, because that also provides certain insight about people's perspectives, motivations, communication strategies, and so forth.
You talked about communication strategies. Can you give us a couple examples of things that are particularly unique to right-wing extremist communication, just to help us understand what you mean by that?
Sure. In terms of this case, for example, 1776 is is very relevant. To an outsider, that might just sound like a number or a fairly innocuous historical reference to the Revolutionary War. But to insiders within far-right extremist culture, that has a very specific connotation in relationship to violence, and it really is a direct call to violence.
Tell us a little bit about the materials that you reviewed in this case to address these 4 issues.
Before you go there, I just have one follow-up question, sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
When you were talking about the field work and you said that sometimes you, you say you embed yourself, like what do you mean? How is that different than an interview? And does the group that you're embedding yourself, like do they know that you're embedding yourself, or are you undercover? I'm just trying to understand what the distinction is between field work and the interviews.
Sure, it's a great question, Your Honor. The field work would involve a more immersive experience from a research standpoint. So it would include a lot of observation. It would include informal interviews, which would be much more conversational in style. When you're embedded, depending on the approval you've received from what's called the Institutional Review Board, which academic research is governed under federal regulations under institutional review boards. There is a way to do that where you don't have to obtain informed consent, and you could do it. You could be embedded surreptitiously without your participants or subjects' knowledge. The field work I did, certainly in terms of folks that I lived with, they knew that I was doing research. Some of the larger gatherings that I attended as part of field work, people wouldn't necessarily know that I was a researcher, and they might assume that I was one of them, and then I essentially would notify people as my relationship with them kind of developed. And so the main distinction I would say between the interviews is they're much more structured than compared to the field work, which is again intended to be a much more naturalistic way of gathering information, whereas the interviews are while helpful and certainly provide a lot of insight, are also pretty structured. And
None of this
formalized.
proves that Trump did anything wrong.
And for the
None of
most
it.
part, you're not becoming a member of a group, pretending to be a member of the group while you're really just doing research.
I've never done that, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
And Dr. Seaman, can you just give us a couple real-life examples of, you mentioned sleeping on someone's couch or in their spare bedroom, like how do those come to be?
Well, it's a pretty kind of involved process, you might say, in terms of gaining people's trust and building rapport with individuals, spending time with them to where they feel comfortable inviting you to do that. Now, sometimes it actually ended up happening much quicker than I expected. Contacting folks, when I first started, this was in the very early stages of the internet, so P.O. boxes were still kind of a thing. So my first contacts actually, emerged through letters that I wrote to P.O. boxes, and then was able to meet with individuals in person, and then from there develop relationships to where they were comfortable enough with inviting me into their homes.
And just help us understand how sort of someone who's a member of a right-wing extremist group would say to a university professor, why don't you come stay in my bedroom? Like, how does that come to be?
Doesn't always quite happen like that. I've had many doors slammed in my face, and certainly been asked in not so polite terms to get lost. So that certainly happens. But for some, they see it, I think, for a lot of different reasons. First, people sometimes enjoy being the focus of attention. So the having a researcher say that they're interested in you and want to spend time with you. For some people, they find that satisfying on some level. For some, they see it as an opportunity to get their message out, to recruit potentially if not the researcher, then to at least get their message out there and try and shape things and influence things more broadly. So I think there's a number of different motives that lead to people making those kind of invitations.
And I want to be clear, we've talked about sort of your work with field work and interviews with the groups involved in January 6th. Did that work happen before or after January 6, 2021?
Before.
Okay. Did you rely on all 3 of these methodologies in your work in this case?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And are these the sort of methods and materials that experts in your field reasonably rely on in forming opinions upon the subject of political extremism?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Based on your scholarship, your prior work, and your review of materials in this case, are you familiar with the events of and leading up to January 6th, those who participated in the attack and Mr. Trump's role in those events?
Yes, I am.
Your Honor, at this point in time, we tender Dr. Simi as an expert on political extremism, including how extremists communicate and how the events leading up to and including the January 6th attack relate to longstanding patterns of behavior and communication by political extremists.
We'll renew our silence for objections, Your Honor.
Professor, excuse me. Professor Simi will be admitted as an expert on political extremism, including how extremism communicates, and his interpretation of January 6th vis-a-vis his expertise in extremism and extremism communications.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Let's turn to some high-level findings, and then we'll get more granular as our conversation continues. Okay, Dr. Simi?
Sounds good.
So on the screen, we have pictures of the three groups we've talked about, but let's start with a basic definition. What is far-right extremism?
The best way to think about far-right extremism is it's defined by some core characteristics. And when you first say in terms of thinking about it, visualizing it, is if you think about a constellation in the sky, if you think about a broad-based network, that's what we're talking about with far-right extremism. There's individual adherents, there's groups and organizations. These are all part of this constellation. And it's pretty far-ranging. It includes, a disparate set of elements. But then there are these core characteristics that cut across certain beliefs, practices, and then communication strategies.
Let's talk about some of these core characteristics. What are some of the core characteristics about beliefs in far-right extremism?
Several things, really. Heavy reliance on conspiracy theory, explaining events, situations as a result of kind of shadowy forces that are unseen. And those, the specific types of conspiracy theories are pretty far-ranging that are kind of adhered to among far-right extremists, but the use of conspiracy theory is very central.
Everything that you
Strong
just described, though, is
distinction
protected
between
by free
us and them.
speech.
And of course, people in general.
Free
make
speech
distinctions
means that
between
you
us
have
and
the
them.
right
Oftentimes it's
to
quite
believe those
innocuous if
things
you
and
think
talk
about
about
it. For instance, sports fans, make distinctions, Packers fans versus Vikings fans or so forth. Pretty innocuous stuff for the most part. But what we're talking about here in terms of distinctions between us and them for far-right extremists is that them are really viewed as enemies, as representing an existential threat, and they're often described in very dehumanizing terms. Degenerates, scum, infestation. These kind of dehumanizing terms are often used among far-right extremists to describe the people that they believe are opponents and that represent these threats. Another central kind of tenet is really an anti-democratic ethos that really moves in the direction of supporting authoritarian impulses, authoritarian beliefs, authoritarian leaders, structures of various sorts. So I would say those are kind of three defining aspects of beliefs.
Great. Next on your slide is practices, including violence. Talk to us about the role that violence plays in far-right extremism.
Well, because in part of what I just mentioned about the beliefs, the idea that there's these existential threats out there that have been dehumanized, violence is viewed as a necessary tactic to achieve political goals. Violence is glamorized and glorified in many ways, viewed in a kind of legitimized fashion, seen as a form of self-defense to fend off these existential threats. So it is, again, very central to, certainly not the only practice, but it is a central practice.
And the last core characteristic is communication strategies. Tell us a little bit about communication strategies you've observed in your work?
Yeah, so some of the things in terms of communication strategies that I've observed, but other scholars in the field have also observed as it relates to far-right extremism, is a reliance on doublespeak, which is a specific kind of deceptive style of communication that often involves using words that have multiple meanings, one meaning for insiders, another meaning potentially for outsiders. Using language with a so-called wink and a nod, you might say. Also, making substantial kind of distinctions between front and backstage behavior, so presenting oneself or a group in a particular way that's more favorable on the front stage, and then
I'm gonna fast forward it.
I think we can talk about kind of different roles that individuals have in terms of within this culture as it relates to violence.
Wait a minute, what happened? Is it over?
Listen to the Book Notes Plus podcast with Brian.
And it's a multifaceted relationship, really. So it's happening in many different ways. But one facet certainly is through rallies where violence is occurring, and there are both promotion and endorsement of violent incidents or violent assaults that are occurring at rallies. So that would be one facet. Again, I would underscore, though, the relationship is emerging between Donald Trump and far-right extremists in a lot of different aspects to it.
Okay. So the video on the left, Your Honor, is P53. It's another admissible but not yet admitted exhibit.
And that's a video of
It is,
President Trump?
yes.
Okay, 53 will be admitted.
We'll play the video.
You know, he was a guy who was swinging very loud and then started swinging at the audience. And you know what? The audience swung
Gosh, this
back.
video.
And I thought it was very, very appropriate. He was swinging, he was hitting people, and the audience hit back.
How does this exchange support your opinion in this case?
So this was a press conference. Actually, Ben Carson had just dropped
What?
out to announce.
What does this have to do with anything?
For Donald Trump's candidacy. But during the Q&A portion of the press conference, one of the journalists asked Donald Trump about violence at rallies. And so Donald Trump was responding to that question, specifically referring to what appears to have been a violent incident that had just recently occurred prior to this at a rally in Las Vegas. And what you hear there is, again, this focus on self-defense, violent self-defense. So he's setting up this scenario that you have these counter-protesters that are kind of antagonizing things, and that his supporters then use violence as a form of self-defense, and he's really endorsing that, and he's pretty clear in the comments.
And, Your Honor, the second video is P56. We'd also move for its admission.
And that is also
Yeah.
a speech of President Trump.
Yes.
P56 is admitted.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue.
So set the stage for this
How
video
is
first
this-
and then tell us what you saw in the video.
Sure. So this was, press conference. Excuse me,
What does
press
that
conference.
prove? I don't understand.
On the heels of the Unite the Right rally, which again, just is to underscore a deadly Unite the Right rally where one person's murdered and dozens of others injured by white supremacists who had planned and organized an event to be violent, shown up in Charlottesville, Virginia, and executed dozens of acts of violence throughout the day, including murder.
Red Pill woman commented
During
on
this press
Rumble.
conference,
Trump
we heard
won.
the president refer
Yep.
to there being fine people. And one of the things, as part of this group of white supremacists who gathered that day, and one of the things certainly that we know.
Red Pill
is
woman
white
just a remake of the
supremacists and
J6
other
Kangaroo
far-right
Court
extremists
Inquisition.
heard that
MAGA.
message as an endorsement, and they tell us that. They thank the president afterwards for the comments.
Who thanked the president?
David Duke, who was present that day at the Unite the Right rally, longtime neo-Nazi Klansman. Richard Spencer, one of the key organizers of Unite the Right, who was present that day. Andrew Anglin, the founder of the Daily Stormer, who wasn't present at Unite the Right, but is a leading kind of influencer among far-right extremists. All three of those folks thanked the president for the comments and said that they understood some degree of kind of condemnation in the comments was necessary on his part, but in large, they took it as an endorsement.
In your work on leaders of political extremism, have you ever seen a national leading political figure endorse violence in the way that you've seen Donald Trump endorse violence?
No, I have not.
Now, let's go to a rally in Alabama.
You won't.
And tell us what we're going to see here.
So on my left there, the rally in Alabama, Birmingham, you're going to hear Donald Trump comment about a protester at the rally and needing to be removed.
And then what do we see on the right?
And then the following day is Fox News segment where Donald Trump is calling in on the phone and is being asked a question about what happened at the rally.
And Your Honor, this is exhibits P50 and P48. We move for both of their admissions.
Let me,
Red Pilled woman said, "Thanks for streaming this on Rumble. Nice of you. You're welcome."
This is the one on the left,
P50's on the left.
P50, and let me
Okay,
see the interview before I
Great.
get rolling.
all right, let's play P50. Okay, Dr. Thimi?
Sure.
Teabag therapist. Oh, LOL. Oh, yay. OOC quip.
And then now, and you see he's referring to a protester there.
To a protester.
Yeah.
What?
And now let's play the interview,
Huh?
P48.
What?
And it was I don't know, you say roped up. He was so obnoxious and so loud, he was screaming. I had
What's that even a
10,000
clip
people
of?
in the room yesterday, 10,000 people. And this guy started screaming by himself.
What on earth?
And then, I don't know, rough up.
Oh, teabag therapist, out of context, yeah.
Because it was
Exactly.
absolutely disgusting what he was doing. This was not handled the way Bernie Sanders handled his problem, I would tell you. But I have a lot of fans, and they were not happy about it. And this was a very obnoxious guy.
This
who
was
a
in
troublemaker who was
November
looking to make trouble.
2015.
I didn't get to see the event.
What, sorry,
That is 51,
P48.
P48 is admitted.
So they're
Thank you, Your
trying
Honor.
to say
So,
that
tell us, Dr.
he
Simi,
was laying the groundwork for
what did
like
you
years, I guess?
see in Trump's reaction the next day about his relationship to political violence?
They're trying to prove like a pattern of
Right,
behavior.
you get,
I think.
again, the built-in kind of defense, self-defense argument there in terms of his comments, but you get an endorsement. Maybe he should have been roughed up. You get the maybe inserted, which qualifies it a bit, but what far-right extremists hear is they hear the comments at the rally, the strong language about getting him out of here, the person's assaulted at the rally by multiple people, and then the next day, Donald Trump essentially endorses the assault that was committed.
Okay. And we have one more series of
They feel like
pair of
this is
Trump
strong
videos.
language,
Let's
but
go
it's
to that
really
slide.
just it's proof of why we need freedom of speech.
And, Your Honor, these are
Because
both Trump
freedom of
speeches,
speech protects
P123 and
speech that you
P56,
find
and they're
objectionable.
both just Trump speaking.
So even if it's objectionable, to some
Sorry,
people.
it's P56 and 123.
Different things are going to be objectionable to different people. It's still.
Thank
free
you very
speech.
much.
And don't hurt him. Don't hurt him. See, if I say, go get him, I get in trouble with the press. The most dishonest human beings in the world. The worst. If I say, don't hurt him, then the press says, oh, Trump isn't as tough as he used to be. Can you believe this?
So tell us about the communication strategies Donald Trump is using in that video.
Well, he makes this proposition about if I say go get him, which I have no
Communication
idea
strategies?
why a national political
He's
figure
using
would
in
ever
this
say
clip?
go
What?
get him, right? That kind of use that kind of language. So that's that unconventional aspect that we were just talking about. That, for far-right extremists is something that they are galvanized by, that they're really mobilized by that lack of convention. But he says, if he says that, then he gets in trouble. But if he says, don't hurt him, then they say he's weak. And so it's a very kind of mixed message, but certainly there's no clear, consistent message about condemning violence in any, way, shape, or form, which you would expect, again, among our leaders.
Unless,
Your Honor, I'm going to object. The witness continues to say you would expect this among our leaders. Historically, I'm not aware of any leader like this. We'll accept, the court has accepted his expertise in far-right.
Well, that is the
extremism.
case when
He
you
is not an
move
expert on
through
political
most
discourse, political
times in
campaigns,
jail after
issues along
the
those lines, historical
saints of
behavior of
fentanyl
other
OD'd
presidents.
and they actually
So
call
we
for
object to that.
violence. Oh, you're talking about Floyd?
He has very limited expertise.
Who
there,
against
and
Trump
that's
began
what
when he
he's
bit
here for.
Hillary, a red pill woman. She back in there, but it's also there's a George Floyd mask on Amazon. Says sprinkling soul with please be patient. I have autism. Oh, dude,
Dr. Simi, in
dude.
your 27 years working on far-right extremism, do you look at the relationship between far-right extremists and politicians as part of that work you've done?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Both local and national politicians?
That's correct.
Okay. In your 27 years of experience, have you ever seen either a statewide or national politician use the kind of language that we're seeing here from Donald Trump about violence?
Same objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
No, I have not.
Okay. Let's turn to the second video, and before we play the second video on this screen, tell us what you see, tell us what we're going to see.
This is also from the press conference after Unite the Right, so same press conference that we saw the earlier clip about fine people.
Okay.
And we're going to see additional comments.
I'm sure in that group there was some bad ones. The following day, it looked like they had some rough, bad people. Neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them.
You're saying that they're bad people.
Why doesn't Donald Trump saying there were some rough, bad people sort of serve as a kind of condemnation that you said you were looking for?
Far-right extremists understand that those kinds of negations, that kind of condemnation is going to be necessary on some level. And again, they tell us that. So it's very clear that from an audience perspective, far-right extremists realize that that part of the comments were necessary, but that still
So like
the
he didn't
overall
really
message for them
mean
they
it?
received was affirmation.
And as part of your work on far-right extremism,
What?
have you looked at how Trump supporters react to these kind of statements that we've seen?
So they.
Yes, I know.
And as a general matter, what did you see?
Yeah, well, I mentioned, for instance, Andrew Anglin and the comments
don't
that he made, where he
understand.
actually
I'm
literally,
confused.
says that basically Trump.
That doesn't take much,
gave us,
granted.
Encouragement, affirmation. Gave
I'm
us
easily
a little bit
confused.
of condemnation, which we understand is necessary. Overall, it's good for us. And many non-leaders, rank and file, similar sentiments expressed on various social media platforms and so forth.
Okay. Now, in your work, have you seen other politicians use language like fight, and et cetera, in their speech?
Yeah?
And what
there-
observed
why was there
differences
any
do
difference?
you see between Donald Trump's use
Here he goes. He's going to explain the
of
difference to us.
rhetoric like that and other political speakers?
Well, this is all about context, what we've been discussing, this relationship between Donald.
The
Trump
context
and
was the
Barack
same.
Obama. It's, you know, it has to be understood within a pattern that
Oh,
developed
God.
over multiple years. And so the meaning of words within that pattern, within that context, takes a certain shape. The same word, though, in a different context, without that pattern, would obviously have different meanings.
In your study, have you ever seen any other
Oh, Lord.
national political figure have the same kind of repeated violence occurring in their presence and refusal to condemn or endorsement of it as you see with Donald Trump?
No, I have not.
I want to turn now to the events leading up to January 6th. We've talked about sort of Donald Trump's relationship with far-right extremists generally, and I want to focus on the lead up to January 6th. And I want to start
Relationship,
with
like, is he a member?
admitted exhibit
Like an honorary
about
member?
Donald Trump saying to the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. So let's play this, and then I have a couple questions for you about this statement.
Stand back, stand by. Wait for my signal.
Stand back and stand by.
What impacts did Trump's statement of
Context
stand
was
back
worse
and
when that
stand
one didn't
by
call for when
to
you
the
see them in
Proud
a restaurant,
Boys
approach them and kick
have?
them out. Then called.
It's powerful. It's
That's called direct
influential,
action and harassment. Yep.
immediately, well received as, again, affirmation, as an endorsement of sorts. You start to see Proud Boys turn the mantra into T-shirts that are being sold. And it's not just the Proud Boys that receive that message. Far-right extremists more broadly saw and heard that message as affirmation, as an endorsement.
I mean, that could be possible.
in
I
this
suppose.
exchange,
I don't know what all
who-
they were really thinking and how they interpreted that,
well,
internalized.
who used the word Proud Boys? Was he asked a question about the Proud Boys, or did he pick that out of his own brain to say it?
Yeah, can you replay it?
Sure.
Look, it's right there on the screen.
What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacist and white supremacist, white supremacist and white
Proud
supremacist.
Boys, stand back and stand by.
So, the replaying the clip helped answer the
That
question?
was an unfortunate choice of words.
Yeah.
Red pilled woman, Proud Boys, always kick Antifa's butt.
I mean, he
Yeah.
obviously says Proud Boys.
Yep. And you mentioned that Proud Boys and other extremist groups took this as an endorsement. Did Trump eventually issue a statement that these groups understood as a call to stop standing by, but rather to act?
Before you go there, I mean, what does stand back, stand by, how did they, in your view, interpret it? Because it doesn't mean anything to me.
Sure, yeah. They interpreted it as a preparedness, as an endorsement, and to be prepared, and to kind of be on alert, we might say,
For something.
for something.
Antifa works
And
too.
did Donald Trump
Spelled
then
Antifa wrong.
tell them what that something was?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Let's show
This is
the next
also
slide.
stupid.
What do we see on the left on this slide?
A tweet from Donald Trump,
Oh,
and
And in your work,
tweeted.
what importance does this tweet have?
very substantial. You see the reference to a 36-page report about election fraud.
Need to get something to
And
drink.
the
I'll be
end
back.
statement is the final kind of line. Big protest in D.C. on January 6th. Be there. Will be wild with exclamation point.
Okay. And in your work, did you look at how the far-right extremists reacted to this tweet?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Let's play Exhibit P80. And, Your Honor, this was on the admitted or admissible exhibits, so based on Your Honor's earlier rulings, let's just play this as a demonstration rather than admissible evidence, okay?
It's Saturday, December 19th. The year is 2020. And one of the most historic events in American history has just taken place. President Trump, in the early morning hours today, tweeted that he wants the American people to march on Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021.
And now Donald Trump is calling on his supporters to descend on Washington, D.C., January 6th.
He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and show our numbers. Donald Trump keeps telling everybody, January 6th, man. January 6th, see you in D.C. That's today, man. This dude is sending this tweet out every single day, and you can see the pieces, friends. They're all moving together for a straight-up lit party in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. This is the most important call to action on domestic soil since Paul Revere and his ride in 1776.
We're going to only be saved by millions of Americans moving to Washington, occupying the entire area, if necessary, storming right into the Capitol. Now, we know the rules of engagement. If you have enough people, you can push down any kind of a fence or a wall.
This could be Trump's last
Gotta
stand.
love
And
Alex
at a time when
Jones.
he has
Gotta love
specifically
Alex
called
Jones.
on his supporters to arrive in D.C. That's something that may actually be the big push Trump supporters need to say, this is it. It's now or never.
You better understand something, son. You better understand something. Red wave, bitch. Red wave is going to be a red wedding going down January 6th.
On that day, Trump says, show up for a protest, it's gonna be wild. And based on what we've already seen from the previous events, I think Trump is absolutely correct.
Motherfucker, you better look outside. You better look out January 6th. Kick that fucking door open. Look down the street. There's going to be a million-plus geeked-up armed Americans. The time for games is over. The time for action is now. Where were you when history called?
What did you see in the reaction of right-wing extremists to Trump's tweet in that video?
There's quite a bit there. You have various references, including specific references to attacking the Capitol, storming the Capitol, pushing indoors. You have a reference to Red Wedding, which is a reference to a TV show, a massacre that occurs on a TV show. You have general kind of calls to action based on the tweet and the tweets that followed in terms of urging people to go to January 6th.
In your review of this, did you also look at other reactions of right-wing extremists to Donald Trump's "will be wild" tweet beyond this?
Yes, I did.
And in your general review of the reaction to the "will be wild" tweet, did you see folks understand the purpose of being there?
Yeah, absolutely, including that it's now time to take action. We were on standby, and now it's time for action.
Okay.
So there's actual explicit references and statements made by far-right extremists about that understanding.
Now, I want to play Exhibit P73 next, which is the video that Trump retweeted the same day as the "will be wild" speech. And let's play the video, and then I want to ask you how you connect, what connection you see between the "will be wild" tweet and the video. Dr. Simi, I have a few questions about this video. Tell us how the communication strategies used in this video relate to communication strategies used by other leaders of far-right extremists.
Well, the fight for Trump and save the world, save America. So again, this goes back to something we've been talking a lot about, which is this idea of an existential threat.
I'm pretty sure that song will.
Requires certain kinds of.
I don't know if they played it on your guys' end yet, but I'm pretty sure that song will get copy struck
I should point out
on YouTube.
The videos reposted from the Donald Wynn, a site that became a hotbed for violent far-right extremist comments.
I don't understand what
specifically related to the attack on
that video even
and
proves.
that's that context that's also important. We've been talking a lot about looking at that larger context from where the video comes from and the consistency.
And let me stop there. What do you mean by it was reposted from the Donald Wynn? Like, tell us how this video came to be, because Donald Trump posted from his Twitter feed, right?
Right.
Okay, so what do you mean by it was reposted from the Donald Wynn?
It
Well,
originally appeared.
Hold the Donald Wynn people responsible for how they weaponized it.
Appears on any platform.
Not
it can be
Trump.
Posted on a different platform. And so prior to
Somebody needs to be
Donald Trump, Twitter, it
held
appeared
responsible for it. Hold the Donald.
And what significance
Wynn
to you
for
does that
their-
context have?
Again, as I mentioned, the Donald Wynn, had for quite some time been a hotbed for far-right extremist comments, statements involving violence, and then ultimately in the lead up to the attack on the Capitol, there were specific statements about attacking the Capitol and committing various acts of violence on January 6th. So that's
And this is donaldwin.com or something?
net, I believe, which it's actually now Patriots, and so the domain name has changed since January 6th.
It was donaldwin.net. Okay, okay.
At that time. I couldn't tell you exactly when the domain name change happened.
And how, based on your work, how do followers, the right-wing extremist followers of Donald Trump, interpret this fight for Trump mantra that we hear chanted over and over again in the video?
Far-right extremists view the word fight in literal terms.
No, they don't.
Fight implies the need to commit violence to fend off threats. And again, from their perspective, they would see fighting as a form of self-defense.
Now, based on your work,
When you say self-defense, it's more of like an existential self-defense of democracy.
It's well, they tend to be anti-democratic, so I would leave off the last part. But yes, definitely an existential threat that needs to be fended off.
The threat to democracy is they see it because they feel like it's corrupt, etc., right? I mean,
Yeah, so in that respect,
and talk to us, Dr. Simi, about how this self-defense language, the Stop the Steal movement in the fall of 2020, how that plays into the extremist view of the election process that's going to play out from November through January.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Just following up on the judge's question in terms of the existential threat that you've talked about, far-right extremist theme, and their framing in terms of self-defense. Let me ask a preliminary question first. How does self-defense, that viewpoint, relate to the way the extremists looked at the election and the process that followed the election?
So are we making self-defense extremists related? What?
And means still having things taken, things stolen, so the election was stolen, the system is corrupted, all of that is consistent with the broader kind of worldview we tend to have.
Leading much objection.
And
I don't know.
what did
I'm
they
not a lawyer,
view,
but
based on
maybe
your work, as
teabag
the
a therapist.
existential threat that the election posed to them?
To no longer have Donald Trump in power and to have that taken from them.
Now, based on your work, how did far-right extremists react to Trump's calls to come to Washington, D.C. on January 6th?
They were galvanized, mobilized, energized.
Beyond organizing them to come to Washington, D.C. on D.C., what did you see about other reactions they had to Trump's call for them to be there?
Well,
Don't
a
believe in
number of
self-defense.
things
That makes you an
happened after
extremist.
The December 19th tweet, and certainly lots of messaging occurred in terms of far-right extremists, being energized and mobilized in terms of towards January 6th.
And on the next slide, we have a couple examples of some extremist reactions to the
Just imagine
Will Be
clown
Wild tweet. Tell us what
being
we
played
see
in
on
the
the
background.
left.
It helps.
First,
Red-pilled woman says.
who is
Yeah.
the group, the 3%ers original?
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, the 3%ers are organized in different kinds of sects. Well, so the 3% original would be one kind of sect of 3%ers, and you might have another one, 3%ers Kansas, so forth and so on across the country. So this was one of those.
And what do you see in the quote, the first quote where they say, "Stand ready and are standing by to answer the call from our president"?
Yeah, this is, goes to, the way in which the comment about, that was made during the debate really resonated with far-right extremists, not just the Proud Boys, but here you see the 3%ers referencing.
I almost
the
kind of
statement
wish that Trump had never said the stand
and, saying that, they're
by
ready for
part.
action.
And then the next
Yes,
quote
I
says,
should've-
"Pure evil that is
should've
conspiring
realized
to
that how much
steal
that
our
would have
country
not
away from the
twisted and
American
used
people."
against
Do
them.
you see that?
Really, we should have realized that.
How does that fit into the pattern of communication you've seen?
Again, it represents the worldview in terms of seeing these imminent threats, these existential threats, deeply tied to the idea of the stolen election, but also more broad than that, basically our country is on the verge of being completely taken away from us.
And then the next quote from the 3%ers original is instructing any member who can attend to participate on January 6th because the President of the United States has put out a general call for patriots of this nation to gather in Washington, D.C. Did you see other examples of far-right extremists viewing the Will Be Wild tweet as a general call for patriots of this nation to gather in Washington, D.C.?
Yes, it was I'd say very substantial. Okay. That was I would say across far-right extremists, there was a substantial presence of that reaction.
And on the right, we see another message. Why don't you read the message and tell us how that fits into what you've seen in terms of patterns of communication?
That's
Yeah, so
that's
here
funny,
you have
teabagging
a
therapist.
message, that says Trump is calling for Proud Boys to show up on the 6th. So pretty straightforward in terms of that's how the message was received in terms of the tweet.
Okay. Now, beyond using social media to bring people to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, did Trump say or do anything else to communicate his support for protesters who were coming out to support him?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Were there rallies between after the election and before January 6th in D.C.?
Yes, there were.
Okay. Was there one in November?
Yes, there was. A Million MAGA march.
Okay. And at the Million MAGA march, did it turn violent?
Yes, it did.
Okay. And, Your Honor, I'd like to show a video for demonstrative purposes only. This is a video that on the left is of Donald Trump's motorcade sort of driving through the march. It hasn't been admitted, but I think just for demonstrative purpose only, if I could show it to the expert.
That's fine.
Oh no! Don't be enthusiastic. Don't be wearing flags now. Say 2020. Don't chant USA. Don't do it. No! Get that American flag out of there. It's treasonous, I tell you.
So what do we see in that video, Dr. Simi?
Well, you see a
Free
presidential
speech?
motorcade.
I see free speech. That's what I see.
Through, the protest, at least this segment of the protest, and obviously they're responding very favorably to the motorcade and very excited.
Showing this is only helping Trump. I don't know. I kind of feel like there's people that have made up their minds what they believe.
In your work on political violence and extremism, have you ever seen a national politician show support like this for a rally that turned violent?
Objection, Your Honor. That's a leading question.
Whoa, we
I'll
finally got an
re-ask it.
objection.
Objection sustained.
Dr. Simi, how does the video we just watched relate to your study of other national politicians?
Objection, Your Honor. I don't think he's testified that he studied other politicians beyond the scope of expertise.
He did actually previously testify that part of his work includes studying national politicians in general and their relationship to extremism. So I'm not
See, back in
going to answer
therapist,
the
exactly.
question to the extent he can.
I've never seen anything, certainly in recent history, that's similar to this, what happened.
Okay. On the right, what do we see?
So this is a tweet by Donald Trump responding to what happened ultimately in terms of the violence that occurred. And you see it starts with Antifa scum ran for the hills today when they tried attacking the people at the Trump rally. Because those people aggressively fought back, Antifa waited until tonight. Ultimately says to attack innocent #MAGA people. DC police, get going, do your job, don't hold back.
So, was the violence before or after the drive-through?
After it was in the evening.
How did far-right extremists view Donald Trump's comment on the violence?
He said these boys get going, do your job, and don't hold back.
Essentially
What?
responsibility at Antifa and using a language that would be consistent with the kind of language they would use to describe Antifa as scum. So again, there's an alignment in terms of the language, and then there's the at least perceived endorsement of the violence that again framed as self-defense. That the violence directed towards Antifa was necessary for self-defense purposes.
Red Pill Woman, this is all just
Were
a show.
there events outside of
Source judges already
rallies
know they're going to convict
that
Trump for everything.
show you
Yeah, I
how
personally think he's gonna convict for
extremists
everything.
reacted to Trump's
Not necessarily because he's
rhetoric about
guilty,
stop the steal
but
and
because that's just
invocation
what I
of political
think is gonna
violence?
Yes, there were.
Okay. Let's look
I don't
next
think he's
at
escaping any of this
the
unscathed.
the video that's already been admitted into
Some people
evidence.
disagree with me.
And before we play the video, tell us, what are we looking at here?
As the Stop the Steal conspiracy theory started galvanizing far-right extremists, one of the things we saw was a substantial increase in threats to election workers and election officials. And so here we're about to hear from one of the officials in Georgia, the Secretary of State's office, essentially asked President Trump to stop inciting violence. So that'll be his comments in the video.
So let's play the video and then let's talk about how Trump responded to that request.
Okay.
What you don't have the ability to do, and you need to step up and say this, is stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get shot, someone's going to get killed. And it's not right.
Who was he telling to stop encouraging people to engage in violence?
President Trump.
Okay. How did President Trump respond to that specific call from the Georgia Secretary of State worker to stop telling people to engage in violence?
So to the right of the video you just played is Donald Trump tweeting a message, but also retweeting the video, at least the clip of the video that you just saw. So we see in the comment, rigged election, show signatures and envelopes, expose the massive voter fraud in Georgia. So we get the video where he's being asked to condemn violence, stop inspiring violence, and the response is to double down on the very thing that Mr. Sterling has claimed is inspiring the threats of violence towards the election workers and officials in Georgia. So the double down on the thing that's inspiring it, no reference to condemning violent threats or saying there's no place for that. That's completely omitted, and the video clip.
And the what?
In the video clip.
Based on your work, how would far-right extremists perceive Trump's response?
Endorsement, support. This is, there's no condemnation. So you get that admission that we talked about earlier, which is often perceived by far-right extremists as a sign of support, but also the doubling down on the very thing that's galvanizing the threats in the
This
first
is all
place
really just
would
an
be
attack
a
on
sign of
speech.
support
All of
from
this is.
the perspective of far-right extremists.
I want to turn now to the days leading up to January 6th. In your review of what happened, did you find evidence that helped you understand why some attacked the Capitol?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I want to play, for demonstrative purposes only, a video, P81, and then we can talk about the context that these speeches fit into the larger January 6th event.
I want them to know that 1776 is always an option.
Ellie Alexander, that dude? I have reasons for why I don't particularly care.
These degenerates in the deep state are going to give us what we want, or we are going to shut this country down. It's 1776. 1776.
Oh no! Don't chant that! No!
So what do we see here, Dr. Simi, and why is this important for your work in this case?
In the first portion of the video clip, you see Allie Alexander talking about 1776 being an option. And you see the references to the deep state being degenerates. So again, we're back to the dehumanizing language, which is an important piece of this in terms of enabling.
To our 21 viewers on number right now.
So that's the
I
portion
hope you will
of
consider
beginning, and then
liking the
second
stream.
kind of portion is Alex Jones shouting repeatedly 1776. And again, within this
Rumble
cultural
rants
context,
or donations
that
to
term is going to have a very
Cash App or
specific
whatever
meaning
are not
that's different than
required in
what
order to
for-
get your
for,
chat read, but
outside
are
of that context.
appreciated.
And in the video, we see a couple banners in the background. Just tell us what those banners show.
Well, you see one to my right, a white banner that says "Stop the Steal." Stop the Steal. In black lettering. There's a Trump banner, 2020. There's
Okay, and now, do you know which people on January 6th that stormed the Capitol saw which political speech the day before?
No, I mean, certainly not across the board. No.
Yeah. And does that undercut your ability to explain sort of what happened on January 6th?
No, I don't think so.
Why not?
We're talking about a lot of different sources of influence. We're talking about what happened specifically on January 6th in terms of the speech at the Ellipse. We're talking about various tweets. We're talking about various events in the lead up to January 6th. So, for saying one thing is the source of the influence would not be really accurate. What we can see, though, is among far-right extremists, how these different sources of influence ultimately resulted in terms of producing the attack on the Capitol.
And in your work, did you see Donald Trump as sort of leading that influence?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Now, let's talk about what happened on January 6th.
So before, I think what we're going to do, since it's been almost 2 hours,
Okay.
is let's take a break. But Mr. Kessler, I just want to make sure that you'll do cross probably immediately following we have a break between, because I'm assuming Mr. Olson, you're kind of coming towards the end.
Yeah, I probably have another 20 to 30 minutes.
So we'll go straight into direct after Mr. Olson finishes. We'll go straight into cross after Mr. Olson finishes his direct. And we will be back at,
Just before we break, I just want to make sure we have a common understanding about our interaction with witnesses during breaks or on the stand. I assume we're not to talk to them about the substance of their testimony on a break. Okay, great, thank you.
so we will be back at 10:15.
I'm surprised that even Chris Christie does not agree with the idea of Trump being removed from the ballot. He did an interview for the I actually missed it. How long did they say the break was? Anybody in chat tell me?
That'll be part of it this year.
Goodness, lady wearing a mask still. COVID is over. Take off your damn mask. There's another dude. Like, why? I can't believe, like, people are still, even in Colorado, they're still wearing masks in public. It's crazy. Getting the spinning wheel, I think it's because they might have stopped until they're back from break, maybe.
A healthy democracy doesn't just look like this. It
Did anybody catch how long they're supposed to be on break? Because that's why we're getting this spinning wheels, because it's stopped. Let's, I got something fun that we can do here.
And it means something very different to the right-wing extremists than it means to you or me. No one else understands this. So when they hear fight, to them it means fight. No one else, just them. And he also that, like, you know, that Trump is constantly talking in coded language. So that's why I think that you need to show his doublespeak and basically say to him, so when Trump said you get out there and get in their faces, you push back, they're not welcome here. There's one of two possibilities as to what he's going to, how this witness will respond. And the best types of questions you can ask on cross are questions that you do not actually care what the answer is, because the question itself, no matter which way, that you're basically having the witness pick the lethal door that they want to walk into. So if you throw a quote like this up there, and you could throw several more quotes out there, you say you get out in their faces, you push back, they're not welcome there. He might recognize that as being, that was such a famous clip, he might recognize that as being Maxine Waters, who is a crazy leftist screaming about how that her followers should follow Trump's family around in restaurants and go out there and harass them. So you say, is that a call for action or not? Now, so he might not recognize it, in which case he might say, yeah, it is. And if he does say it is,
if you're really looking for excellent
you follow up
commentary,
and say, so if that's a call for action,
Joe
so in that
Logic
case,
is
you are,
10 times better
so
than what
this
I
is
am.
the sort of thing that, you know, is you would think is inciting people towards violence. And then if he doesn't recognize it as being Maxine Waters and thinks it actually is Trump, so you basically locked him, so you basically exposed that, hey, look, this is how politicians talk.
I don't think that it matters to them though, that this is how politicians talk. It only matters to them specifically how Trump talks. I mean, I guess there's arguments you can make. I just don't think that it matters what argument they make. The judge already knows how they're gonna rule. This is the Supreme Court, actually, of Colorado. They already know how they're gonna rule. So fine, I guess you can compare and contrast what Maxine Waters has said in the past. But it's like, I don't know that there's anything that they can say or do that's gonna... Guess I'm just too much of a pessimist. I don't know.
This is what they say. No one thought that Maxine Waters was, even though frankly that was a far more overt call. And if he says it's not a call, let's say he recognizes it. He says it's not a call for action. So you're saying when you say you get in their faces, you push back, that's worse than if someone says 1776. That's worse than if someone says FAFO. Really? So that's more overt. And if he says, well, that was Maxine Waters, it's different there. So you say, oh, so the exact same words, that gives you an opportunity instead to say, so you're saying that the exact same words are only wrong if they're spoken by someone on the right, not by someone on the left. And either way, whichever door he walks through, if this judge is remotely impartial, has any inclination toward being impartial, you've just exposed this guy as being a complete sham, that he's just some crazy leftist who's like, oh, if the right says it, then it's terrible. But if the left says, no matter what they say, if he says, hey, you know, if he says, don't get violent, that's a call to say, you know what I mean? I mean, this clown identified Tim Pool
Yeah.
as a right-wing extremist.
Tim Pool,
which
whatever
I'm
his
not
extremist.
gonna kid you. He's definitely veered closer to the right. In 2020, there's no way anyone thought of him as a right-wing extremist. Zero chance. Nobody thought of that. But he's throwing
Yeah,
clips of
that's
2020,
true.
reading about the January 6th upcoming rally, and basically saying, "Oh, here you go, reactionary YouTube." They had Salty Crackers. They had Alex Jones. Right-wing extremist. I'm telling you right now, I'm sure that he would identify me as a right-wing extremist, and that's why I'm offended. There was zero clips from me, zero. It was really somewhat offensive. But this is a great quote, and they should really have ready like a dozen of these quotes, not just one, but just show another one from the left, another one. There are probably countless quotes from the red speech that Biden gave where he was identifying MAGA as the biggest threat. Oh, ultra MAGA. But you don't take the quote where he's saying ultra MAGA. You basically take you find other quotes where they're basically talking about, the measures that have to be taken in order to identify that this is how politicians frequently speak. And it's ridiculous to start saying that if you're saying that the right-wing extremists alone are the only people in the country who take that as a call for action. Left-wing extremists don't. Only right-wing extremists take this as a call for action. Basically, that the other half of the country, they're just a whole bunch of crazies. It's a very thin limb to walk out on. And I understand that in Colorado, you might be able to walk out on that limb. I'm simply saying it exposes everything about the sham that's happening here. Trying to figure out, I see I'm having issues here. The page is timed out to Zoom place the page. Let's refresh this page and see if this is still working.
You'll be fine.
Okay, it is still working, so I'm good there.
No, dude, it's gonna.
All right, so I'm gonna mute that.
It's gonna get the spinning wheel again because they've stopped broadcasting. They're gonna have a separate broadcast for part 2.
The court is using a timer on these proceedings. The court is. I don't know how much time was allotted to each of them, but at the end of the trial, at the end of the day yesterday, they gave a time used deal. And they said how much time had been used by each side. I don't know what's happening because then that's supposed to be back for another 4 minutes, but I'll show you what's happening in the courtroom there. A reaction is someone who is intent on defending the existing order, reacts to revolution. To call up people reaction is called sedition. It could be that they're all settling in to make sure that they're ready at 12:15. Start promptly.
Good morning, we're on the record on Herman Anderson v. Janet Griswold.
Oh, no. When I refreshed, did they end this thing?
He really does not understand how this works.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's getting all panicky thinking that they're not going to come back.
That makes sense because they said it's going to be 1 week of trial.
Yeah, I'll probably have another 20 to 30 minutes.
So we'll go straight.
I know this was the end of it.
Let's go forward here. Maybe.
And that's where it ends. Oh gosh. I hope they didn't screw this up.
Dude, you just don't understand, and I don't know how to make you understand. Without having the money to constantly super chat at you. I mean, I'm gonna try commenting. I don't think he'll see this.
30th.
And patriotically.
Oh, shut up, you. It's so frustrated. It's so hard to get anyone who's streaming this thing properly.
I'm trying. He won't see this because I don't have the money to
frustrating me right now.
They are ending the stream after each segment. Why? I don't know. But he just needs to wait until they post.
Okay,
new
so
link.
I'm going to show you what I'm looking at here, so you can understand what I'm trying to do. So C-SPAN, which is the only place that I found this on here, they say this is starting at 12:30. I don't understand what the hell they're doing. They're saying this is Colorado Day 2, Part 2 over here. The earlier stuff, when I click on the earlier link, which is gone now, but the link we were watching for the last 2 hours, oh, this is it. This is it here. This is the link that is an hour and 56.
You'll be fine.
And this is where we just came into the break. So I think C-SPAN is screwing up.
No, they aren't, dude.
I hope when
This
they
is
say this, that was a 10:05.
Ugh.
So it seems as if they're basically keeping this thing on a break for another 15 minutes. It's 12:16 my time, which is 10:16 Mountain Time, where this trial is happening here. It seems as if this link over here, Day 2, Part 2, is set up for 15 minutes from now, which I guess is supposed to be after the break. I'll have available airing on the C-SPAN networks. Looking control college type of system at state level. These big cities are killing our states. Oh, I totally agree with you on that. I've been calling for that for a long time. The more localized our governance is, the more American it is. And the better it will tailor to its specific citizens, because people are different in various parts of a state, much less across the country. Okay, so let's see. I look on YouTube.
Oh, Joe.
I have Trump
You just need to relax.
trial live, Colorado. When I put this in, this is from yesterday. This is not the right thing, as you'll see if I open a new tab here.
Should have done more.
This was yesterday. This is on
more stuff
they keep playing
earlier.
here. This was yesterday's opening statements. This is streamed 21 hours ago. "22 hours ago. "21 hours ago, 16 hours ago.
I don't know why, but it's
They're
not
gonna do.
letting me look at his live chat.
Oh, please. I'm not dealing with that.
I'm trying to just see if his chat
This is
is
much
trying to
trickier
show
to
him the
find than I
same thing that
anticipated.
I'm
I'm not gonna
showing,
kid
and
you.
it's just not. Why is there no live chat button? All I'm getting is the comment thing. That's weird.
We should anticipate.
The app itself is showing me the chat.
So we should anticipate it. What do we got here?
And I can see my chat.
I don't know if they have 18 hours. Supposedly they have only like 2 witnesses left. It's hard to imagine. And they only used like 4.5 hours yesterday and 2 hours
Is it
today, which they have
possible for
another
him to
half hour with
disable
him.
live
So that puts
chat?
them at 7 hours. I don't know what they're going to do with another 11 hours. I can't even imagine what they're going to do with another 11 hours. What a mess.
That's just weird. I don't understand what's going on.
Is it? It's live?
The mistakes they made in certifying incorrect
Thank you.
and fraudulent numbers in a process not approved by the state legislature. Mike can send it back.
So, Professor Simi, when you read, then you're even faster. And I have the advantage of being able to see this for the stream.
Okay.
So,
My sincere apologies.
we're just trying to protect the record. Did you get it?
Wait, are they back now?
So let's not read the second tweet, Dr. Simi. But I do want to ask you, well, both focus on Mike Pence, right?
That's correct.
What significance does these early morning statements focusing on Mike Pence from Donald Trump have in your study?
It's part of the this a stolen election that if Mike Pence takes certain actions, then Donald Trump would remain in power. Which again, for far-right extremists, they're seeing this in terms of the what's necessary to prevent
so
the
this
transfer
is
of power for Donald Trump to remain
Part 2
president.
now.
Now let's turn to some of the speech that Donald Trump gave on the ellipse. But before we do that, can you tell us, did you see similarities or differences between the speeches of Donald Trump that we've looked at earlier today and the speech he gave on the ellipse in terms of his use of language?
Yeah, many similarities.
Okay. Can you give us some examples that we should be looking for?
Sure. A certain aggressive kind of words in terms of phrasing things. The really strong emphasis again on this issue.
Bud Rogers, I hope the leftist clown is asked by the defense who the far left extremists are. Yeah.
Your country,
Exactly.
your culture, your way of life. These kind of themes that we've been discussing. Very prevalent.
All right. Let's watch the speech, and then I want to ask you a few questions about it, or portions of the speech.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede.
So, you're allowed to not give up. You're allowed to never concede. It's stupid.
We will not take it anymore, and that's what this is all about. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election. We want to go back and we want to get this right. Because we're going to have somebody in there that should not be in there, and our country will be destroyed, and we're not going to stand for that. And we're going to have to fight much harder. Now it is up to Congress to confront this egregious assault on our democracy. And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. You will have an illegitimate president. That's what you'll have. And we can't let that happen. you. I love Pennsylvania. And we're going to the Capitol.
Nothing he said just now is
What did we
illegal.
see in this speech
None of it.
that related to Trump's use of language? But you mentioned it's similar to what he's used before. What do we see here in terms of his use of language before that led to violence?
Fight or fighting, some variation is mentioned approximately 20 times in the speech. There's a strong emphasis on this. There's at one point the association between fighting and playing by a different set of rules when you have fraud. So there's this kind of what you might call a permission in terms of using other actions than one might take. There is the focus on losing your country is a consistent theme. And there is a mention of peaceful and patriotic, which is also consistent with many of the things we've been talking about in terms of plausible deniability.
Based on your understanding of political extremism, how would extremists have understood Trump's repeated calls to fight in that speech?
A call to violence.
Oh God.
Why?
It's within far-right extremist culture, fighting is meant to be taken literally. That a call to fight for far-right extremists, especially within the context as it's laid out, that these threats are imminent and that you're going to lose your country, then fighting would be understood as requiring violent action.
Trump, in the speech, said, we're going to walk peacefully and patriotically. Why wouldn't the extremists in the audience have understood Trump calling only for a protest, a peaceful protest?
Part of it has to do with the emphasis. So we get back to contextual cues as being extremely important in terms of understanding how communication operates. And in this case, there's such a balance in favor of the fighting versus only the one reference to the peaceful, marching peacefully down to the Capitol. So there's a clear, for far extremes, there would be a clear understanding that fighting is the real message, not being peaceful.
Is it your testimony that if you had watched that speech and nothing had happened, that you would have the same view? I mean, I guess what worries me with all of this is it's all kind of in 2020 hindsight. You know what happened. So, first of all, did you watch the speech in real time?
No, I did not.
Okay. But is it your testimony that had you watched it in real time prior to knowing the ultimate result that you would have considered a call for violence?
I found something that I'm going to share instead.
He was not
I like
reelected. My concern was not necessarily the election itself, would be post-election, in particular as we came closer to inauguration time.
And did what we saw on January 6th reflect your concern that you made before the election
Yes, it did.
about political violence led by Donald Trump?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Now, we've heard some testimony that some of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers already had a plan to attack the Capitol. You mentioned the 1776 return sort of planning document.
Or maybe this view is
How
going to kind of
could
suck and we're not going to be able to see
this speech
anything.
by Donald Trump
Maybe I was wrong.
affect them if they already had a plan and were already executing the plan?
Well, two things I would just want to mention. First, the plan among those like the Proud Boys to go directly to the
It's
Capitol
possible the sound might be better.
and essentially begin executing the attack.
We might be
That
able to
was
hear them
largely
better.
influenced by things that happened prior to January 6th that involved Donald Trump, not the least of which would have been the December 19th Will Be Wild.
And honestly, that's the thing that's important to me is that I want to be able to hear him. Uh-oh. Are you pausing? Uh-oh. What?
That ends up doing, it creates a situation where you have this very, much larger crowd than you would have had, with just those that went directly to the Capitol. And of course, that, as Officer Hodges testified to yesterday, that becomes a weapon of sorts itself. Certainly becomes a force multiplier. And so that large number of individuals who then appear at the Capitol, and some of whom then directly take part in the attack, all of that becomes, a reinforcement to those who went there directly.
And earlier you talked about sort of the violence implementers, the violence planners. Remind us the term for the folks that are maybe open to it but don't show up with a plan.
Well, we refer to them exactly in those terms. So there's also the term sympathetic bystander, which would fit some of those who, marched to the Capitol as well, who may not have necessarily directly partaken in violence, but were there. And, as was, I think, illustrated yesterday, just the size of the crowd became, a very substantial obstacle and prevented the Capitol from being protected.
And you spoke, well, let me ask a threshold question first. Based on your review of what happened on January 6th, did the crowd have a unity of purpose that you saw?
Yes, it did.
Okay, even though some were more prone to violence than others?
Objection leading, Your Honor.
Why don't you just answer the first question? The original question was, did the crowd have a unity of purpose that you saw?
Yeah, yes, it did. I can go ahead and
Can
explain.
you explain?
Yeah, sure. Certainly wasn't that every single person, there was some kind of single mind to the crowd. But you can see, as demonstrated in some of the video footage, some of the things that people said after the fact, some of the things we learned from some of the court documents, for example. You can see there were certainly, a degree of a unity of purpose in terms of coordination and cooperation and collaboration during the attack on the Capitol.
Okay. Let's play some videos from the Capitol. And Your Honor, P117 similarly is a list, is an exhibit that you sort of deemed admissible. We'll play it just for demonstrative purposes here because it involves folks other than Trump. But let's play this video and then I have a couple questions for you, Dr. Seaman.
Okay.
So I want to first focus on the first call. This is our house. This is a revolution. Based on your understanding of the communication patterns of far-right extremists, what does this is a revolution? How would that be interpreted?
But it's a violent revolution. Yeah. And of course, by this time, there has been various violent acts already taken.
And on the second clip, we see with the language still on the screen, we see fight back, they touch us, we hit them back. How does that relate to some of the communication patterns we talked about today?
Very consistent with this theme of self-defense. So framing the violence that one might be committing, but setting it up as necessary to defend oneself.
And who's the they in here?
The members of the crowd that are saying that.
I'm sorry, they touch us.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the police officers.
Okay. Now on the right, we see a flag flying there. We see two flags. What's the meaning of the symbolism in the bigger flag?
Yeah, so it's U.S. flag there, but it has a 3%er symbol in the blue portion. And then you can see in the background, there's a Confederate flag, which is a pretty prominent symbol used among far-right extremists to represent the Confederacy and the U.S. Civil War.
Now, did you see in your review of what happened at the Capitol, did you see other indicia that folks came planned to commit violence there?
Yes, I did.
Talk to us about what you saw that evidenced folks came planning to commit violence.
Based on equipment the people brought, including weapons, but also like things like tactical gear, headgear, various sorts of kind of preparation, things that would indicate certain a person had planned ahead of time that they would be engaged in violence.
You mentioned weapons. And I believe Mr. Gessler yesterday said there were no weapons discovered at the Capitol. Were there weapons discovered at the Capitol?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. What kinds of weapons?
Wide range, certainly knives. There were, of course, flagpoles that were used as weapons. Officers, in some cases, had their own weapons taken from them and used. And then, of course,
Your Honor, we're going to object to this. He's testifying on items that he has no personal knowledge of. Obviously, he's able to base an expert report and develop his opinions based on hearsay, but here he's actually testifying as a fact to things he has no personal knowledge.
Yep.
To the extent the petitioners want to prove weaponry,
Fair.
they can use sources and whatever they seek to do, but they don't get it in through expert testimony.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
Sure.
This goes directly to Dr. Simi's observation that many of the right-wing extremists at the Capitol came prepared to do violence, just like they brought tactical gear. The fact that they brought weapons supports his claim or his opinion and finding that the people were there with a purpose of committing violence and engaging in a violent political attack on the Capitol.
And was this disclosed?
Yes, it was on page 33 of his report.
Okay.
Can you just give me a moment to look at page 33?
Oh, sure, of course.
In this case, they actually appear to be saying some things that you can't hear very well, but you can hear on here.
Or his opinion and finding that
So we're
the
going
people
back to
were
this.
there with a purpose of committing violence and engaging in a violent political attack on the Capitol.
And was this disclosed?
Yes, it was on page 33 of his report.
Can you just give me a moment to look at page 33?
Oh, sure, of course.
Oh, I think we can't hear it because they're doing a sidebar. Duh.
Your Honor, his opinion is that people coming armed to the Capitol is consistent. That is different than him providing substantive testimony to people actually who were armed. If he wants to accept that information as a hypothetical, then he can base an opinion on it. But the fact of the matter is, Your Honor, when Mr. Olson said he's basing it on his observations, if he was at the Capitol on January 6th, he can certainly testify to that. And if that's a premise of his opinion, that's fine. But he doesn't get to testify as to the actual testimony of that, the actual facts.
Okay, well, he was here and he watched the videos where we all saw people armed. But
Your Honor, if I may just...
I mean, I'm taking it for what it's worth, Mr. Gessler. He obviously was not he wasn't at the Capitol, I presume. And so his testimony is based in part on what he's observed in court. And I'm not going to strike his testimony that It's his understanding that people were armed.
And, Your Honor, if I could, I just want to correct a significant misrepresentation that Mr. Gessler just made about the report. I put the page on the screen about what Dr. Simi actually said, and he didn't say what Mr. Gessler said. He says in the first line there, many who attended came prepared for violence from those armed with weapons, including guns to tactical gear. And then he talks through a list of significant examples where there were findings by people, either they refused to go through the magnometers or folks were arrested. So this is a significant and substantial disclosure that Mr. Gessler misrepresented.
So the objection is overruled. Overruled.
He can testify.
All right, let me get us back to where we were. Great. So this is, we'll pick up where we left off, Dr. Simi, just to reorient us. We talked about this slide. Now, in addition to coming armed and with tactical gear, was there other evidence that you relied on in understanding the mob's purpose at the Capitol?
Sure, a variety of things, things that were, apparent on video footage, things that were learned after the fact in terms of statements that individuals made, and then of course, prior to January 6th itself, the information that was available in open source on social media about the plans in terms of committing an attack on the Capitol. So.
Did you review as part of your work a collection of sort of social media statements that participants at the mob made describing why they were there and what their purpose was?
That's correct.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm not offering this for admissibility, but just to talk about the basis for Dr. Simi's opinion. If I could bring up Exhibit P25, just to show the kinds of things he relied on. It's one that Your Honor said had hearsay in it. We're not offering it as direct evidence, but it's a demonstration of the kind of material that Dr. Simi relied on.
Let's get him to confirm that first.
Okay. Sorry. Well, can I show it to him to make sure we're talking the same thing? Okay, great. Thank you.
The WebEx camera view sucks, but let me ask you something. You can hear the witnesses better on the WebEx thing than you can on the typical live stream. So which are you more concerned about? Are you more concerned about whether or not you can see this? Or do you care more whether
Dr.
or not
Simi,
you can hear
on the
everyone
screen
clearly?
should be.
Which do you prefer? Let me know in the chat.
Nope, I'm sorry, I have the wrong exhibit. We'll move on, Your Honor, I apologize. But did you rely on a compilation of statements on social media as to why people were there at the Capitol?
Yes, I did.
And can you just tell us in a high level what that was? Or what the kind of statements they made, excuse me?
Yeah, to attack the Capitol, to prevent the certification of the election results, to disrupt the democratic transfer of power.
Okay.
The democratic transfer of power.
Did you, great. And then did you look at, whoops, sorry, we already saw that. Did you look at some videos of the mob itself in terms of their unity of purpose?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I think we've seen the video on the right a couple times. This is when Danny Hodges was attacked, so let's not play that. But tell us what the video on the left is.
This you're going to see.
T-back therapist. I mean, I don't trust the witness as far as I can
Folks start chanting,
throw the earth.
a heave ho, and so there's a coordination, a kind of vocalization that they're engaged in as they're moving in a particular direction.
And what are they trying to do?
They're trying to essentially push through.
But why watch it if you can't hear
barricade
them?
of officers in this kind of
You know?
tunnel area.
And Your Honor, that was Exhibit P21, and it's on the,
organized elements.
the objection was overruled. It was on the to be admitted exhibit list. We'd move for admission of P21. Now, we've talked, let me skip to the next one. We've talked about the mob's purposes. Did you see any evidence in your review of the material in this case that showed Trump's role in the attack as the
sound
attackers
was way worse yesterday.
viewed it, what they thought Trump's role in the attack was?
Somewhat.
Yeah, there was definitely consistent themes in terms of individuals reporting that they believed Donald Trump had sent
Donald
them there,
Trump's army.
that, indicating substantial influence from Donald Trump.
And if we, this is video P96, again, it is a video of what happened on January 6th, Your Honor. It's on the to be admitted list from October 27th. We'd move for its admission as well.
Is this the one that was prepared by the January 6th?
Yes, yes.
I will admit it.
Okay, thank you. So let's play the video, Dr. Simi.
What really made me want to come was the fact that, I had supported Trump all that time. I did believe, that the election was being stolen, and Trump asked us to come.
He personally asked for us to come to D.C. that day. And I thought, for everything he's done for us, if this is the only thing he's going to ask of me, I'll do it.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Did you recall President Trump mentioning going to the Capitol during his speech?
Oh, yeah. So that's one of my disappointments. He said he was going to go with us, and he was going to be there.
I know why I was there, and that's because he called me there, and he laid out what is happening in our government. He laid it out.
But I remember Donald Trump telling people to be there, right? To support it. So you mentioned that the president asked you. Do you remember a specific message?
Basically, he asked for us to come to D.C. Big things are going to happen.
What got me interested, he said, I have something very important to say on January 6th or something like that. Is what got me interested in
Trump has only asked me for two things. He asked me for my vote, and he asked me to come on January 6th.
And in addition to this compilation put together by the January 6th committee, did you see other evidence of the stated purpose why people were there?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
were
And actually, I
invited by
think
the
I had the right
President of the
exhibit. I was
United
just looking at the
States.
wrong page from before, so
Yeah,
let's try
they-
this
they
again.
encouraged
I
him to
apologize.
be there.
Again, for demonstrative purposes only, Your Honor, let's look at P25. And
But people
if
are
we
ultimately responsible.
scroll
for their
down
actions.
here, and I can just, can you read that okay, or do I need to make it bigger?
No, I can read that fine. Thanks.
Okay.
That's better.
For instance, we see, is this part of what you looked at in your work on this case?
That's correct.
And we see statements like this that were collected as part of legal proceedings. I am here to see what my president called me to DC for. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
And then we see just sort of statement after statement of a similar vein. We can just pull on this page. And like we see a statement here from a Watson about why they went to DC. Are these the kind of statements that you relied on to see the purpose for why these folks went to DC?
Yes, this would be consistent.
Okay. Now, I want to turn back to the attack on the Capitol. And did we,
Move on. I am going to exclude 96. I apologize. I think I must not have watched the whole thing. But I'm going to exclude it as hearsay. That doesn't mean if that's something that Mr. Seaman would consider informing his opinions, that he can't do that, but I'm not going to admit it into evidence. So 96 is excluded.
Federal butt inspector.
thank you, Your Honor. And just to make sure the record's clear, Dr. Simi, did you look at Exhibit 96 and other statements by folks at the Capitol as part of forming your opinion today?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Now,
Let me ask you
did
this.
Trump do anything during the attack
What
that influenced the
we wanted
extremists
Mike
engaging in
Pence
it?
to do.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Would you
Did Trump
want
do anything during the attack
Biden-
that influenced the extremists engaging in
Kamala
it?
Harris to have the authority to do the same?
What was that?
Well, there's a, the tweet we're looking at here from Donald Trump indicates that Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what he was.
I hear a lot of arguments about what he did and didn't have the authority to do. I don't really know. I'm not a lawyer.
Would not be rectified, basically, that Mike Pence was supposed to rectify the stolen election, and that didn't happen.
Did
Nixon JFK
That
was
did
in the
not
same
happen.
situation. See, I don't remember the specifics of all of that.
we saw the
you would
tweets earlier in the
want
day
anybody, whether-
where Trump was focused on
whether
Mike
it
Pence.
was-
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
And did
mean,
Trump
maybe I
talk
did
about
say
Mike
you.
Pence's
So
courage
you want
in the ellipse
anybody,
speech?
regardless of whether they're Democrat
Yes, he did.
Okay.
or Republican.
And so now he says Mike Pence didn't
You're
have the courage.
comfortable
Now
with
we've
them
seen the
having
video
that
of
authority.
the person reading this tweet with a bullhorn, so I'm not going
I
to
don't
replay
care
that
even
now.
whether-
But I do want to ask
I
you
don't
about
care
one
whether, you know-
image from that video, which is the noose
I don't-
that
okay.
we see
Wait.
there.
I don't care
Based
whether
on
or
your
not.
study of the
Nixon did it to
right-wing
JFK. Do you want
extremists,
them?
does a
to
noose
be
have any
able to
particular
have that
meaning
authority?
in that movement?
Because I wouldn't want
Within
Kamala
the
Harris
extremist culture,
to
there
pull
is
that
a
stunt.
particular book that has a substantial.
I wouldn't
amount
be
of
happy
influence
about it,
called
but let's
Alternative
face it, we would.
It's published in 1978, and it's it's a fantasy.
Well, they actually changed the
novel
law, though,
that,
to make
envisions
make sure there wasn't any
revolution
misunderstanding.
within the
They've
United
actually
States.
changed the law.
And there's a passage in the book that's referred to as the day of
Because
the
that's
rope.
their excuse
Day of the
for
rope
being able to change it.
What they call us race traitors.
I
political
think it can be a
opponents of
dangerous
various sorts
dangerous authority.
Are come from light posts or lamp posts, and this is mass.
No, they
mass
they
killing.
fixed the
And
law,
that term,
Teabagging.
Day of the Rope, has
They
a lot
wanted
of
to make
similarities
absolutely
to
sure
far
that the
right
next
extremists. We actually
VP
saw it used by,
didn't
one
think
of the
that they
members
had
of
the
Proud
authority to
Boys,
do that.
Specifically referencing what was going to happen on January 6th, used the term, it's going to be Day of the Rope, and I'm paraphrasing, but something.
It
to
does
that
matter
effect.
what we want. That's supposed to be
Now,
the kind of government
did Trump
that we
eventually
have. Speak out on that and
say
no,
something
and
that
petition
caused the
government
crowd to stop their
change the
attack?
law.
Yes, he did.
Great. Let's look at this. Was this video
No.
what you had in mind?
Oh,
Okay.
too bad.
I know we've played this video before, but
There's
let's play
things you need
it
to
one more
Google
time. I'd like to get your input on the video based
rule
on some
change
of our
that
earlier
they made-
conversations today.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen
The
from
rule
us.
change that they
It was a
made
landslide
had to do with just
election,
the
and everyone
basic
knows
rules
it,
that they've made,
especially the other side.
procedural rules,
But you have to go
and
home
apparently
now.
had nothing to do with
We have to
anything
have
that needs to be
peace.
ratified in the
We have to have
Constitution.
law and order. We have to respect our great
Oh, yeah. Term limits are
people with
happening.
law and
anytime
order.
soon.
We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people. We have to have peace. So go home. We love you. You're very special. You've seen what happens. You see the way others are treated that are so bad and so evil. I know how you feel. But go home and go home in peace.
He tells them to go home. He tells them to go
Dr.
home.
Simi, based on our discussion
everything else that they're going to focus
how
on.
leaders of right-wing extremists communicate to their followers, how does this
Once
speech
attack
fit into
failed.
that context
Oh, God.
and communication style?
You didn't do it soon enough.
Extremists, I think there's three things
You
happening.
didn't do it soon enough.
One
You needed to
is
do
a
it the moment they
continuing,
started attacking.
Affirmation of the stolen election conspiracy theory. So really continuing to emphasize the idea the election was stolen. Two, an affirmation of the attackers and the attack that just happened. And then three, there is consistent messaging in terms of going
He
home.
wasn't going to get through to them by
Why
being
is
a
that
jackass.
consistent messaging in terms of going home notable in your experience?
It's not just a one-off. It's not just something that seems more about developing plausible deniability, but it does come across as a consistent theme that this is what Donald Trump wants us to do.
Did he, in this speech, condemn the acts of violence?
No, he did not.
I want to turn to one last tweet from Donald Trump. This is was this before or after the speech we just saw?
This is after.
Okay.
Why are today's experts not
And
actually experts?
how does this
I don't know.
tweet
I think experts
about
I think you can
what
be an expert,
happened
I just
that
think you
day
can be
fit into the pattern of
interpreting the
communication
facts wrong.
of leaders of far-right extremism?
Again, it's no condemnation. There's affirmation. Again, further emphasizing the stolen election.
I actually
Referring to Patriots,
believe
great
that we're going to
Patriots,
have
So,
fewer
extremists, that
conservatives
is a
and fewer
substantial
people on the
meaningful
right
term because they see
getting
themselves as patriots.
involved in certain industries because
Emphasis
it's like,
on, being treated unfairly.
oh, you're claiming to be an expert.
Does
I automatically don't believe you.
Donald
To
Trump
me,
continue to enjoy
there's this
strong support
attitude
from
coming
far-right
across
extremists?
from you, T-Bag, and no offense, that just bothers me. The man's an expert.
Now,
He's just wrong.
I forgot to ask this earlier before we
Experts
get to
are
your
coming
sort of
wrong.
headline or your conclusions here,
But
Dr. Simi.
it's like
have you been paid for your work? in
saying
this
you're an
case?
expert has become like a
Tell us
curse
how much
word
you've been
or
paid and what
something
your hourly
that-
rate is.
we need more
And what's your hourly rate?
conservatives
$300 an hour.
studying
Is
this
that your
stuff
standard
so that
rate?
That's my standard.
we can
Okay,
have that
thank you.
opposing viewpoint.
Let's look at sort of the conclusion
speech works.
slide
You have
here.
opposing
Could you describe
viewpoints.
for the court your conclusions about the issues that you were
I
asked to
don't know.
address in this case?
I think we're going to have fewer.
January 6th, in terms of the attack on the Capitol, certainly should be seen within a larger,
Far-right sitting
longer
back
context
laughing because they
of
hate
political
Trump. They
violence
see him as a
committed by
Zionist shield.
far-right extremists.
They don't even need to do anything.
There is certainly a high degree
That's news
of,
to me. Okay.
evidence supporting that the violence was committed for political goals, political purposes. Certainly was a large number of
Interesting.
people
Anyway.
in planning an organization that was present, apparent in terms of the attack on the Capitol.
He knows
And
facts.
the goal really
The
was
problem
focused
is
on
the
preventing
way he
democratic
interprets
transfer
the
of power.
facts, T-Bag.
Now, within that context of far-right extremist violence, January 6th does have some unique aspects to it that are also important to underscore. So the size, the intensity, the scope would stand out in terms of what's represented by the attack on the Capitol. And thus, most notably, the role that Donald Trump played in terms of influencing the events. The nurturing of the violence ultimately committed in terms of the attack on the Capitol, that would certainly be distinctive from other types of violence committed by far-right extremists.
How
You only say that
confident
because you don't.
are you in your conclusion
I'm
that
just shutting
Donald
up now.
Trump played a
See,
central
this is
role,
where
led
you get,
these
yes,
events?
I voted Trump twice.
Why
I
is
am
that?
not your typical Trump
It's
supporter.
in the evidence. It's from my years of studying.
I
how
just
far-right
don't
extremists,
view or internalize everything
perceive, communication,
quite the same way that
the
you do.
relationship that they developed with Donald Trump over multiple years, the various signals, including everything from the things we've discussed at
Yes.
the rallies in terms of
Yes, that's what the
promoting
experts
or
say.
endorsing
The
violence,
towers
the things done over
fell from
social
place.
media,
Yeah, just FYI, probably in the next 30 minutes, you will have to go over to Joe's stream to continue to watch the rest because I have to get ready for work. The YouTube stream with maybe one or two viewers will get redirected to his stream automatically.
Far-right extremists and how much they perceive him as essentially on their side or one of them.
And in this pattern,
Okay, the only
repeated
thing that-
pattern of communications,
The only thing
do you have
you're
any
gonna get
doubt
out
in
of me
your
in
mind
response to
that
this,
Donald Trump is
I am a
aware
Republican, I am
of the
conservative, I
influence
am
his words
MAGA.
have on right-wing extremists?
I just don't view quite everything the way
Pretty clear to me. I mean, I'm not in Donald Trump's mind, obviously, but
a lot of people in the MAGA pro-Trump community do.
in terms of the repeated nature of the things we've
And
been
it's
discussing,
why
that's
it's
all.
why I don't get kind of
Your Honor, these are all the questions I
Joe
had, but
gets.
I wanted, if you had any additional things you wanted to ask
Because
Dr. Steamy about,
his
I wanted
outrage
to make sure we
And
covered
him
those before I
basically
sat
preaching
down.
to the choir is what everybody wants. That's what they want to hear. They don't want to hear more.
Honestly, you're not a mind reader, you don't know what President Trump.
You can't tell fact from BS. I get it. Oh, that's fine. If you feel that way, you don't have to watch my stream. That's fine.
Possibility that this just isn't just that he speaks this way versus deliberately speaking in a way.
I do just fine, but thank you.
Cause people to react.
Well, again, I would come back to this.
I just
point
have to
about,
view the
social
facts the way
scientists were trained
you
to try and identify
want me
observable
to.
patterns.
There's,
And so,
with both the left and the
including,
right,
I'm not
there's
in
never any
Trump's
room for
mind,
disagreement.
but
We
there
all have
are
to believe the
patterns that
same
we've been
thing.
discussing that were observable
That's what
occurred
drives me
over
nuts about
multiple years,
politics.
Where you had
If you
these
don't believe certain things,
repeated,
you're just not American first enough.
occurrences And things of similar nature kind of repeating to occur.
PhD
And
holders
also
are some of the biggest
from
retards of this.
far
Why
right
we're not going to have more
extremists, how
conservatives
violent it is,
going out there and getting that level of explanation, and it's going to be the biggest screw up
what they believe to be endorsing and promoting.
to our country. And the most dangerous thing to our country is that we're not having people going to these in the fields, and we're leaving them wide open for the woke to take over.
One deep element of, but that again doesn't.
I'm not even hardly paying attention to the damn trial anymore. I'm too busy arguing with people that want to say I'm an idiot. When there's no point in arguing with you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a couple quick follow-up questions? The Unite the Right rally, when was that?
2017, August 2017.
And we saw the speeches from when Trump was president commenting on very fine people on both sides, right? Okay. And the Proud Boys were involved in some of the Unite the Right rally?
Yes, they were.
Okay. So when you have a political rally where people are, or someone's murdered and other people are hurt, right? I'm sorry. And then you later have the president unprompted identifying that group by name, right?
Correct.
Objection. I'm not sure that was quite a question, but there was an answer to it. This is clearly leading an argument to.
Okay, well, I'll rephrase my question.
I'm gonna sustain the objection, not on the argumentative part, but the leader.
Okay. You just talked about patterns, observable patterns of the social scientist.
That's right.
Okay. Is what we see between the 2017 rally, 2019 comment, is that an observable pattern or not in your mind?
Yes, it's certainly part of one.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, things that are said, things that are done, these are things that we can point to as happening or not happening. We can look at how the statements or actions are interpreted by others, how they're perceived by others. These are all things that we can, observe. Again, when we're talking about being in somebody's mind, that's not really observable.
But in terms of when you're talking about observable patterns, this is an example of one, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Simi. I have no further questions at this time. We may get to talk again after Mr. Gessler, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Your Honor, I have about 3 or 4 minutes to fumble around with the technology, and I can't promise my fumbling will be over at that point, but just want to try and get set up here, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right, how do I log into this thing?
What do you need to do?
I'm going to want to be able to see the videos as well. Maybe I don't even need to. Okay. Okay, Your Honor. I'm just going to try and go somewhat technology-free. We'll see how that works, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Simi. How are you today?
Doing well.
Good. And we shook hands briefly yesterday outside the men's room, so thank you for being here. So since you've been a witness before, you know how this works. I'll ask you some questions. If I'm not clear on something, please just tell me.
Sounds good.
So I want to ask you a little bit about your methodology here. So it says that about 217 interviews, you said, on far-right wing extremists?
That's correct.
And over how many years is that?
Beginning in 1997.
Okay. So over about 26 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And 14 of the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and 3 Percenters. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And how many of those interviews were people who participated in the January 6th riots?
So it sounds like a simple question to answer. It's a little bit complicated. There's institutional review board regulations that provide confidentiality. So I certainly wouldn't be able to name individuals that I don't know if that was, if that's kind of where you're going with the question.
Was that where you were going?
I may, but probably not.
Yeah, I took the question just as whether the people in your 14 were involved in the January 6th protests.
None to my knowledge. However, it's certainly possible that, obviously I don't know the identity of every single person, that participated in January 6th. So,
Right.
None to my knowledge.
So you may have interviewed person A, and that person may have shown up on January 6th, but you just don't know.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'd be fair to say that you interviewed these people well before January 6th, those 14?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Did you interview any participants, far right
Chat up, but I-
wing extremist participants
I've got it
in the
down.
January
That's
6th,
gonna
after
be-
January 6th?
Too frustrated.
Okay.
I always have to be so extreme in my views, or I get told. I can't
Did you
separate
live with any families or people
from
who
BS.
participated in the January 6th riots?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Okay. So your interviews and sort of field work, living with people. I'm sorry,
We just really
okay,
need
does
our
field
children
work
growing
consists of
up
interviews and
to
sort of
take over
embedding
these
yourself or
fields
living with people? Would
and
that be correct?
become
That's correct.
This
Yeah.
guy.
Interviews can be either formal in nature or more
Who are
informal.
going to be
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm
honest,
properly describing
not
field work.
biased,
So your field work
and not
all sort
by
of occurred
court proceedings. But no,
with respect to this
because
group
we've
of people
taught-
before
well,
January
because we're
6th.
telling
Is that fair to
teaching our
say?
children.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then as far as sort of embedding yourself or living with families, Did you embed yourself or live with any families that participated in the January 6th riots, to your knowledge?
You're gonna be stuck with this
Okay.
guy. So congrats, MAGA. Congrats.
As far as the archives go, so which archives did you rely on here? I saw a number, let me back up. So I saw a number of, we counted your expert report citations. We looked at them. And I'm going to represent you, we counted about 78 citations to the January 6th report.
I don't like
Does
the
that
way
sound
he's
about right to
interpreting
you?
the facts. I don't like the way that he's presenting the
Well,
facts.
that's good. Thank you for answering the
Make
question
him.
that way. What other archives did you rely on?
So as I mentioned, archives can be more formal in nature or informal in nature. And so social media, for example, would be those would, the various platforms are all types of archives, which has been a big part of my research and what I've looked at, including in this case.
In about
So
15
various,
more minutes,
social media
YouTube is
platforms
to automatically be reversed.
certainly
Good logic.
videos. Again, I've mentioned
And
at the
trust
outset,
me,
YouTube really is an important
You can
type
talk
of
about how PhDs are
among
worthless to
researchers
your
in terms of
heart's
accessing
content on history.
different kinds of
You will
collections
get
of
no
material
argument.
that are housed in that. And again, that's not established for research purposes, but it provides information.
So let me ask you a question. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I may do that a little bit, but so in determining, how do you determine whether you're going to look at one social media archive versus another archive, or do you just choose every single archive you can get your hands on? I mean, how does that selection process occur?
Yeah, some archives have a greater presence of far-right extremists than others. But you certainly want to try and sample from as many different archives as possible. You're certainly it's being unlikely to be able to use every single social media platform, but I've certainly utilized the kind of major social media platforms that are more, you might call mainstream type platforms like Twitter, or what used to be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, but then
To
also
show you
more
how
you might
what an
call
idiot this guy
niche
is.
or fringe social media
We also have an
platforms
expert who
like
is very
Telegram,
confident Trump was a significant
but it has
factor
a
in J6
substantial
siege and Capitol just started
So-
and it opened with fire.
So let me ask you this. So if there's a body of opinion,
J6 did you interview?
you say a body of
Zero.
opinion among sort of far-right extremists,
That's for the following program. and
what
he's right. The
measurements
guy's
do you
an idiot.
have in your profession to determine whether or not a
trying
particular
to-
archive is
trying
representative
to
of that
comment?
body of opinion?
on something that you didn't even interview the people?
The presence.
I mean, the guy's an
try to make
idiot.
some determination
I'm not
about
arguing
their
with that.
presence on that particular platform.
Okay, so it'd be fair to say that the ones that are sort of have a greater presence or sort of more commentary, perhaps louder commentary. I don't know quite how you'd measure loud in the social media world. They type in all caps.
You look at intensity.
Intensity. Okay.
So for instance, a call to violence would be obviously a more intense statement on a social media platform than a statement that didn't involve a call to violence.
Okay, and so that's in part how you choose what to look at. You look at the intensity and the amount of presence.
Those are two things.
Okay, anything else?
Well, you want to look at how the social media platforms compare to each other as well. That way you get a sense of, is there kind of differences in terms of how one platform is used versus another.
Okay. And is any one platform, in your experience, more representative of sort of the body of far right-wing opinions?
I don't think there is, in my opinion, and certainly in the literature, there's never been, to my knowledge, any kind of published scholarly identification of one platform being most representative.
Okay. So I want to apply that, maybe take it down one level for the January 6th rioters. Okay. Did you look at any particular platform that you believe represents the entire spectrum of views, best represents the entire spectrum of views of people who rioted on January 6th?
Well, I don't think there is one single platform, but I certainly looked at a number of different platforms.
Okay.
Yes, to include some of the ones I already mentioned, Telegram, for example.
And you chose those platforms in part based on the intensity of the commentary on there, and the volume of commentary. Is that fair to say? In part.
Not quite. I just want to back up on the intensity. The intensity is something you look at in terms of no matter what their presence is on the platform. You would look at, that would be one indicator of the kind of the nature of the speech and whether there are calls to violence.
So
you wouldn't assume necessarily that there's a high degree of intensity.
So how do you measure or identify the opinions of people who aren't on social media platforms?
Well, that's why you don't exclusively rely on social media. Certainly, that's what the field work.
So
is.
interviews,
yeah, absolutely.
field work?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Surveys can be done.
Okay. Did you do any surveys of participants in the January 6th riots?
No, I did not.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end it here. I am sending those on YouTube over to Joe. Say hi.